There is a moment, right before dawn, when the hands finally stop moving. Not because the work is finished, it never is, but because something deeper than willpower reaches up and loosens the grip. That loosening, that quiet unclenching of fingers that have been fighting for so long, is the first whisper of YESERAYE EFFATA. You have been told your whole life that more effort produces more harvest, that the calloused palm is the only palm the universe rewards. But what if the very tension in your shoulders right now, the tightness you have mistaken for ambition, is the wall keeping the golden rain from ever reaching your field? I want you to notice your breath as I say this. Not adjust it, just notice. Because what we are about to walk through together is not a strategy, not a 5-step plan, not another hustle dressed up in spiritual language. It is an undoing, a sacred unclenching. By the end of this teaching, the frantic reaching that has defined your relationship with money, with worth, with divine supply, will begin to feel foreign to you, like a coat that no longer fits the shoulders it was sewn for. There is an ancient phrase buried in ancient Aramaic teaching, "Ephatha, be open." I have taken that root and shaped it into a working name for the state we will enter together. YESERAYE EFFATA, the surrender state. Not surrender to defeat, surrender to flow. And this leads us to the very secret hiding underneath your exhaustion, the one we will unlock together in just a moment. The reason your hardest working years may have been your most energetically closed. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that the universe operates like a factory floor, that financial resources arrive in direct proportion to hours logged, sweat produced, and exhaustion endured. This belief feels so structurally sound that questioning it can feel almost dangerous, as if relaxing your grip on effort might cause the entire structure of your life to collapse. But energetic alignment does not respond to exhaustion. It responds to frequency. And frequency is not built through strain. It is built through resonance. The same way a tuning fork does not work harder to vibrate, it simply matches what is already calling to it. Think of the last time you pushed yourself to the edge, chasing a financial goal. Remember the tightness in your jaw, the shallow breath, the way your thoughts narrowed into a single corridor of lack. Not enough, not enough, not yet enough. That state, biologically, is not abundance. It is contraction. Your nervous system, sensing threat, pulled energy inward to protect you. The same ancient mechanism that once kept your ancestors alive in famine and danger. The cruel irony is this: the harder you worked from that contracted state, the more you reinforce the very frequency of lack you were trying to escape. Divine supply does not recognize struggle as a currency. It recognizes alignment. This is not a comfortable teaching for those who have built their entire identity on being the hardest worker in the room, the one who never stops, the one who earns every coin through visible suffering. But the harvest of the soul has never required suffering as its price. The ancient mystics who wrote of golden rain falling upon open fields never once described a farmer clenching his fists at the sky and demanding the clouds open. They described stillness. They described open hands lifted, not closed fists raised. I'm not telling you to stop taking action in your life. Action rooted in alignment is sacred fuel. But action rooted in fear, in scarcity, in the desperate grasping for proof that you are enough, that is a different animal entirely, wearing the same clothes as discipline. It drains the very frequency it claims to be building. You can recognize it by its texture. It feels urgent, frantic, joyless. It chases. It does not receive. And the infinite ocean of supply, by its very nature, cannot be chased, only entered. So here is the first unclenching I ask of you. Right now, wherever your hands are resting, them soften. Not as a gesture, but as a signal to the deeper architecture of your nervous system that the famine is over, that the grasping is no longer required. We will return to this softening many times throughout our journey together, each time going a layer deeper, because this is the doorway through which YESERAYE EFFATA enters, not through force, but through permission. Somewhere in early childhood, most of us learned a quiet equation we never consciously agreed to: worth equals output. A parent's approving glance arrived after the chores were finished, not before. A teacher's praise landed on the child who raised her hand fastest, who finished first, who never seemed to rest. And so, the nervous system, ever the diligent student, drew its own conclusion: I am safe when I am producing. I am loved when I am useful. I am worthy when I am exhausted. Nobody spoke this sentence aloud. It was absorbed the way a plant absorbs light, silently, constantly, without ceremony. This is the striving trap, and it is far more sophisticated than simple ambition. It disguises itself as virtue. It wears the face of responsibility, of diligence, of being a good provider. But underneath the disguise is a frightened younger self, still convinced that stopping even for a moment will result in abandonment, scarcity, or collapse. You can work from inspiration. You can also work from terror, wearing inspiration's clothing. The body knows the difference even when the mind has been trained to ignore it. Here is what makes this trap so difficult to see. It produces results, sometimes spectacular ones. Effort born of fear can still build a business, pay a mortgage, raise a family. This is precisely why so few people question it. The striving appears to be working, right up until the moment exhaustion arrives and the harvest, despite all that labor, still feels hollow. Cash flow may increase while peace decreases. The frequency of prosperity is not only about the numbers in an account. It is about whether the having feels like rest or like a temporary reprieve before the next demand. I want you to consider, gently, without judgment, whether you have ever achieved a financial goal and felt the relief last only minutes before a new target appeared, a new mountain demanding to be climbed. This is the signature of striving rather than alignment. The goalposts move faster than the gratitude can land. Sovereign abundance does not behave this way. When wealth arrives through resonance rather than force, it carries a different texture entirely. It feels like arriving home rather than crossing a finish line that immediately relocates itself further away. And this leads us to the secret hiding inside the body itself, the one we will unlock in just a moment, the precise physical sensation that separates inspired action from fear disguised as ambition, and how your own shoulders, jaw, and breath have been telling you the truth all along, long before your mind was willing to listen. Place one hand over your chest right now. Not symbolically, actually do it. Feel the warmth there, the quiet rise and fall beneath your palm. This is where YESERAYE EFFATA first makes itself known, not as an idea, but as a sensation, a subtle loosening in the chest that most people have felt only by accident, usually in moments they weren't trying to manifest anything at all: watching a sunset, holding a sleeping child, standing at the edge of the ocean with no agenda but to witness it. In those moments, without effort, without strategy, the field opens. That opening has a name now. We are calling it forward on purpose. The phrase itself draws from an ancient root, ephphatha, be opened, spoken centuries ago as a command not of force, but of release. A single word that asked something close to simply unclench and receive what was already present. YESERAYE EFFATA borrows that same architecture. It is not a technique you perform. It is a permission you grant. The difference matters enormously, because techniques exhaust the one performing them, while permissions, once granted, require no further maintenance. They simply remain open, the way a window left unlatched stays open in the breeze, without anyone holding it. You may have spent years treating prosperity as something to be captured, wrestled down, earned through proof of suffering. YESERAYE EFFATA asks something almost scandalous in comparison. What if the divine supply you've been chasing has been circling you patiently, waiting only for the clenched fist to finally unclench? What if the harvest of the soul was never withheld as punishment, but simply unreceivable by a field still braced for drought? There is a particular warmth that tends to rise in the palms when the state begins to take hold. Some describe it as a low hum, others as a gentle heaviness, as though gravity itself softened for a moment. I'm not asking you to force this sensation. Forcing it would simply recreate the very striving we examined a moment ago. I'm only asking you to notice, without expectation, whether anything in your hands, your chest, or the back of your neck shifts even slightly as you read these words aloud in your own mind. I am safe enough to stop reaching. This is the doorway, not a metaphorical one. An actual shift in your energetic alignment that begins the instant the nervous system believes, even provisionally, that safety does not require effort to maintain. And this leads us to the practice that opens that doorway fully, the one we will walk through together in just a moment, where I will guide your body itself into the first full unlocking of the Effata frequency. There is an old image worth sitting with for a moment. A hand closed so tightly around a single coin that it cannot receive the second coin being offered. Not because the second coin doesn't exist. Not because the universe withheld it. Simply because the hand never opened wide enough to hold anything more than what it was already desperately guarding. This is the truest portrait of how scarcity operates inside a body that has confused protection with provision. The closed hand believes it is securing wealth. In truth, it is blocking the very channel through which more wealth was always meant to flow. Consider how naturally a child opens her hands when offered something good. No hesitation, no calculation, no fear that accepting one gift will somehow cost her the next. Somewhere between childhood and now, most of us learn to receive with suspicion instead. We learn to ask what the catch was. We learn to brace, even in moments of genuine generosity, as though ease itself were a trick about to be revealed. This bracing becomes so constant that it stops registering as bracing at all. It simply becomes how the hands hold everything, including money, including opportunity, including love. Energetic alignment requires an almost embarrassingly simple physical truth. A closed hand cannot receive what an open hand is built to hold. You can affirm prosperity for hours, recite every abundance mantra you've ever encountered, and still remain energetically closed. If the body beneath the words has not been given explicit permission to soften its grip, the mind can recite the language of the infinite ocean while the shoulders remain braced as though still standing in a desert that ended years ago. Divine supply does not punish this contradiction. It simply waits, patiently, the way light waits outside a curtain that hasn't yet been drawn back. I want you to notice, without forcing anything, where in your body you tend to hold tightest when you think about money. For some it is the jaw, clenched as though chewing through an old argument with scarcity. For others, it is the stomach, drawn in and guarded as if protecting something fragile. For others still, it is the hands themselves, curled inward even in sleep. Wherever you find that tightness, you have found the closed hand. Not a flaw to be ashamed of, but a faithful old guardian who has simply never been told the war is over. And this leads us to the practice that begins to retrain that guardian directly, the one we will walk through together in just a moment, where breath and intention combine to teach the body something it has perhaps never been permitted to learn: that opening is not the same as exposure, and receiving is not the same as risk. Find a posture that allows your spine to lengthen without strain. Seated, perhaps, palms resting face up on your thighs, an old gesture older than any single tradition, repeated across centuries by hands that understood something we are only now relearning. Let your eyes soften, even if they remain open. We are not leaving this moment. We are simply going beneath it, the way a swimmer dips below the surface chop to find the still water underneath. Breathe in slowly through the nose, and as you do, imagine the air itself carrying a faint warmth, the way sunlight carries warmth even through a closed window. Hold that breath for the smallest moment, not a strain, just a pause, like the silence between two notes of a song. And as you release it, slower than feels natural at first, let your shoulders drop a fraction further than they were a moment ago. This is not relaxation for its own sake. This is the first physical syllable of Effata. Be open, spoken not with the mouth, but with the body itself. Now bring your attention to your palms, still resting open. Imagine, without forcing the image, a faint golden warmth gathering there. The way warmth gathers in a hand held near a low fire, not blinding, not dramatic, simply present. This warmth is not something you are creating from nothing. It is something you are finally permitting to be felt. The way a window doesn't create the breeze outside, it only stops blocking it. Let that warmth rise from the palms into the wrists, the forearms, settling finally in the chest, the place where we first made contact with this state a short while ago. As that warmth settles, silently offer the body this permission, not as a chant, but as a simple, private truth. I no longer need to grasp for what is already moving toward me. Notice if anything shifts as those words lend a softening at the back of the neck, a slight loosening behind the eyes, perhaps even an unexpected wave of something close to grief. The body's quiet relief at finally being allowed to stop fighting. Whatever arrives, Let it arrive without naming it good or bad. The opening does not require analysis. It only requires permission. Stay here for as long as feels natural, palms open, breath unhurried. The old guardian of scarcity finally given a moment of rest it may not have known it was allowed to take. This is YESERAYE EFFATA taking root, not as a concept anymore, but as a felt, bodily fact. And this leads us to what happens next, the deeper stillness waiting just beneath this opening. The one we will enter together in just a moment, a stillness that reorganizes your entire relationship with time, urgency, and the pace at which true alignment is allowed to move. There is a particular kind of silence that exists just beneath urgency, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of a held note right before it resolves. Musicians know this silence intimately. It is the rest between phrases, the breath before the next line, the space that gives the melody its shape. Without that pause, music becomes noise, a continuous undifferentiated sound with no room for meaning to land. Your life, in much the same way, requires these pauses, and yet most of us have been trained to treat stillness as wasted time, as the enemy of progress, as something to be filled rather than honored. What strivers rarely understand is that stillness is not the absence of momentum, it is the reorganization of it. Beneath the visible surface of your circumstances, your energetic alignment is constantly rearranging itself, the way mineral deposits rearrange themselves deep underground long before anyone notices a single change above the surface. The quantum pause is the willingness to trust that rearrangement even when nothing observable is happening yet. It is the discipline of remaining open during the part of the process that offers no proof, no progress bar, no visible evidence that anything is shifting at all. This is precisely where most people abandon the practice. They open their hands for a moment, feel a flicker of relief, and then, when the bank account doesn't immediately reflect a different number, they panic and return to grasping, certain that stillness has failed them. But the harvest of the soul does not operate on the timeline of a vending machine. Seeds do not argue with soil about how long germination should take. They simply remain, rooted, in conditions that from the surface look like nothing is happening, while underground an entire architecture of growth is already underway. I want you to consider the last time you abandoned a moment of peace because it didn't feel productive enough, the way you might have caught yourself resting and immediately reached for your phone, for a task list, for anything that would relieve the discomfort of simply being still without earning it. That discomfort is not a flaw in you. It is the residue of years spent believing rest must be justified by exhaustion first. The quantum pause asks you to rest without first proving you deserve it, to trust your energetic alignment is working even in the chapters where nothing visible confirms it. This pause is not passive. It is closer to what a held breath does for a diver about to descend, gathering quiet power before the next motion, rather than abandoning motion altogether. And this leads us to a distinction that becomes essential here, the one we will unlock together in just a moment, the difference between this fertile stillness and the kind of giving up that masquerades as surrender. Because confusing the two has cost more people their harvest than impatience ever did. There is a quiet scandal hidden inside the phrase, harvest without labor, because everything you have been taught insists the two cannot be separated, that the size of the harvest must always be matched by the size of the sweat that produced it. And yet anyone who has ever planted a single seed knows the truth runs differently. The farmer does not manufacture the growth. The farmer prepares the field, places the seed, waters it with attention, and then steps back while a force far older and far more intelligent than effort takes over completely. The labor was real, but it was never the source of the growth itself, only the invitation to it. Receiving, as a spiritual skill, has almost nothing in common with the exhausted collapse most people associate with finally getting what they worked for. True receiving is active in its own quiet way. It requires presence, attention, and a willingness to actually notice the supply arriving rather than rushing past it toward the next demand. Many people, even when wealth or opportunity does arrive, fail to receive it fully because their nervous system is already 3 steps ahead, bracing for the next obstacle before the current gift has even been acknowledged. This is not greed. It is simply an old habit of a body that forgot how to land. I want you to think of the last time something good arrived in your life, with relative ease, an unexpected check, an opportunity that required no struggle, a door that opened on its own. Notice, honestly, whether you allowed yourself to feel that ease, or whether some quiet voice inside you insisted it must be temporary, undeserved, or too good to last. That voice is not wisdom. It is the old guardian again, the one trained by scarcity to distrust anything that arrives without a battle scar attached to it. Divine supply does not require a battle scar as proof of worthiness. It only requires a field willing to actually hold what lands in it. Learning to receive without labor does not mean abandoning your gifts, your work, or your contribution to the world. It means releasing the belief that suffering is the currency that purchases your worthiness to keep what comes to you. The infinite ocean does not measure the depth of your exhaustion before deciding how much to send your way. It responds to your capacity to hold it, your energetic alignment, your willingness to actually receive rather than instantly convert every gift into the next obligation. And this leads us to something that must be said clearly now, before we go any further, because confusing this teaching with passivity has quietly sabotaged more sincere seekers than any other misunderstanding the difference between sovereign surrender and simply giving up, which we will untangle together in just a moment. Let me say this plainly, because the distinction matters more than almost anything else in this entire teaching. Surrender is not resignation. Giving up says nothing I do matters, so I will stop trying. Sovereign surrender says something entirely different. I have done what is mine to do, and now release my grip on how, when, and through which door the harvest arrives. The first comes from despair. The second comes from trust, earned through actually showing up for your part of the equation. They can look similar from the outside. Two people sitting equally still, but their internal frequency could not be further apart. A person who has given up carries a heaviness in the chest, a dullness behind the eyes, a quiet collapse that has stopped reaching, not because it trusts the universe, but because it has stopped believing anything good is coming at all. A person in sovereign surrender carries something closer to readiness and alert stillness, the kind a hawk holds before it moves, not frozen, not collapsed, simply unattached to forcing the moment before its time. This is the texture YESERAYE EFFATA asks you to cultivate. Open hands. Yes. But a spine still straight, eyes still clear, attention still engaged with the life in front of you. This means sovereign surrender does not excuse you from showing up. It does not mean abandoning the action that is genuinely yours to take the conversation that needs to happen, the offer that needs to be sent, the door that needs an actual knock before it opens. What it removes is the frantic energy underneath that action. The part of you trying to control outcomes that were never yours to control in the first place. You take the step. You release your grip on what happens after the step is taken. That release is not laziness. It is, paradoxically, one of the most disciplined acts a person can practice, because the nervous system fights it every single time, certain that letting go of control will result in disaster. I want you to notice the difference even now, in your body, between the phrase, "I have to make this happen," and the phrase, "I have done my part, and I trust what happens next." The first tightens something in the chest. The second, even if trust feels unfamiliar, tends to loosen something at the base of the throat. A small unclenching that signals the nervous system recognizing permission rather than threat. This loosening is not weakness. It is sovereignty, the quiet, unshakable authority of someone who no longer needs the universe to prove itself before they're willing to stay open. And this leads us to the part of the journey where the state stops being something you visit occasionally and becomes something you actually live inside, day after day. The way breathing becomes invisible once it's no longer something you have to think about, which is exactly what we will build together in just a moment. A state that only exists during meditation is not yet a state at all. It is a vacation from your actual life, a temporary visit to openness before the old bracing reasserts itself the moment a bill arrives or a difficult email lands in the inbox. YESERAYE EFFATA becomes real only when it survives contact with an ordinary Tuesday: the traffic, the unanswered message, the bank notification that used to send your shoulders straight to your ears. This chapter is not about deepening the feeling. It is about teaching the body to carry that feeling into rooms it was never previously welcome in. The simplest practice is also the most overlooked. The 3-breath reset. The moment you feel the old grasping return, jaw tightening, chest closing, mind narrowing into not enough, pause wherever you are, even mid-conversation, even mid-task, and take 3 slow breaths with your palms, if possible, turned slightly open at your sides. You are not performing a ritual for anyone watching. You are simply reminding the nervous system, in real time, that the famine it thinks it's protecting you from ended long ago. 3 breaths is rarely enough to solve the external problem in front of you. It is always enough to shift which frequency you solve it from. A second practice involves your relationship with the first reach of the day, the instinctive grab for the phone, the mental sprint into the day's demands before your feet have even found the floor. Try, instead, a single unhurried minute where your hands remain open on the bed beside you, where the only task is to notice you are still breathing, still held, still safe before the day asks anything of you at all. This single minute, repeated daily, slowly retrains the nervous system's very first response to consciousness itself, shifting it from immediate vigilance to a baseline of quiet trust that compounds, almost invisibly, across weeks and months. A third practice belongs to moments of actual receiving, when cash flow arrives, when an opportunity lands, when something good simply happens without struggle. Instead of rushing past it toward the next task, pause for 10 full seconds and let your body actually register the gift. Place a hand on your chest if it helps. Say, even silently, "I receive this fully." This single pause does more to retrain your energetic alignment around money than any affirmation recited without presence ever could, because the nervous system learns through repetition of felt experience, not through repetition of words alone. None of these practices require dramatic time, dramatic ritual, or dramatic belief. They require only repetition, the same way a path through a field is not carved by one enormous act, but by walking the same quiet line again and again until the grass itself remembers the shape of your steps. And this leads us, finally, to what happens when these small unclenchings accumulate, when YESERAYE EFFATA stops being a practice you return to and becomes simply who you are, which is where we are headed in this final part of our journey together. There comes a point, quiet and almost unremarkable, when you realize the grasping simply isn't there anymore, not because you defeated it in some final dramatic confrontation, but because it slowly stopped being necessary. You notice at first in small moments. A bill arrives and your shoulders don't immediately rise to meet it. An opportunity moves slower than you'd like, and the old panic that used to flood your chest simply doesn't. Something has been reorganized at a level deeper than thought, and you almost miss the moment it happened because it never announced itself with fanfare. Real transformation rarely does. This is the unstoppable stillness, not unstoppable because it forces anything, but unstoppable because nothing external can shake loose what is actually rooted inside you. A field that has truly softened does not harden again just because a single storm passes through it. You will still have difficult days. The mortgage will still occasionally arrive before the deposit does. But the frequency beneath those circumstances has shifted, and from that shifted frequency, solutions tend to arrive with less friction. Doors tend to open with less force required. And the harvest, when it comes, lands in hands that actually know how to hold it, instead of immediately clenching around it in fear of losing it again. Sovereignty, in the end, was never about controlling outcomes. It was about no longer needing to. The hands that were once closed so tightly around a single coin are now open enough to hold an entire field's worth of harvest, not because the universe suddenly became generous, but because the channel finally stopped blocking what was always moving toward it. YESERAYE EFFATA was never something poured into you from outside. It was something uncovered, a state that existed underneath the striving the entire time, waiting only for permission to be felt. So here is what I'll ask of you now. Not an affirmation, not a recitation, just this. Right where you are, your hands open one more time, and notice what's already arriving. If you feel that shift taking root, declare it in the comments. Say where you felt it land.